Welcome to the mailbag. Now, this week's mailbag is probably going to be 3 mailbags because I am getting so many questions at the moment. But here we are. Now, remember, these are comments and questions that you guys leave on the channel, and I try to answer or throw out to the general population to see if they've got answers or comments to add. But before we start, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, click the subscribe button. If you want to be notified about when content is added to the channel, click the bell icon. Consider supporting the channel over on Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/TheMusicTechGuyUK. The address will probably be down here somewhere. So the first one from somebody called SP, don't know whether you're male or female, in response to Korg M1 video I did about how to convert a 110V version to a 230V version, 240V version, which is European voltage. And I did this in 2015, very early on, very early video for the channel, to be honest. Have I been running that long? And they write, you didn't show any steps on conversion process. You took the cover off and talked. Perhaps you didn't do it. How about even showing the old power supply? Is it all good if you have access to original parts? But what if you don't? How about details on using non-original parts to convert 110 to 240? And you're quite correct. I didn't show you the mechanics of actually doing it. I showed you how it should be done. But as I said, I did this conversion before I started the channel personally. So it was done probably about a year before I started the channel. And I did the video in response to a question from a tuber out there saying, could you do it? Who actually asked if it was easy to convert from 240 to 110. So I performed the operation the other way around. I went from 110 to 240, but effectively I filmed the explanation of how to do it because the mechanics are the same. It's actually incredibly easy because of the way that Korg lay their machines out. So there are 4 screws to move the top board, and then you can just move it to one side. So effectively you're moving the output board and you move it to one side. You desolder the live and neutral wires from the board, making note which terminals they're attached to, which way around. Take a photograph. Do the same with the power switch wires, although it doesn't really matter with the power switch which way around they are per se, but I would probably keep them the same way around because that means that the contacts stay the same way around on the switch, as in the bit that makes contact is always dead. Remove the post power supply connectors on the other side of the board so they just pull off. Be careful when you're pulling connectors off like this. These will just come off, but you need to just lift them up vertically. Don't try to yank them at an angle because you'll bend the pins. Then there's 6 screws on the board, and then the board just pops out. And then once the board's popped out, you install a new board in exactly the same way. And that's what I did. I bought a I bought a non-working 240V version, took the power supply, which was fine. It was the actual logic board that had been fried. Took the power supply that was fine, put that into my working 110V version, and then put the 110V into the old non-working version. And then I gave the actual unit itself to a friend of mine who is an electronics wizard, and he stuck it on the shelf for about 3 years, and about a year and a half, probably about a year and a half, he got it out and repaired it. So he's now got a functioning one, and he's actually done what this guy has now said he wants to do, which is use non-parts, because this guy knows what he's doing. So in terms of using non-original parts, you can actually get much better transformers nowadays than you could back when the M1 was done. So you will buy a brand new transformer that gives you 12 volts ground, minus 12 volts, plus 5 volts, and another second ground. So you effectively need plus 12 volts at 0.3 of an amp. You need minus 12 volts at 0.13 of an amp. You need plus 5 volts at 1.2 amps. And that's how you do it. If you've got a nice, clean, modern power supply, you will be able to put this together. as this is a sort of standard voltage range, I wouldn't have thought you'd have problems trying to find a power supply that has taps that will give you those voltages. But I've never done it. I know how to do it, and if I did have to do it, I could do it. But that's how you would do it, and I hope that answers the question. The next question comes from my friend Bruce in response to a rant I did about this time last year in 2000, and sorry, this time last year, I think it's 2019, it's 2000, this time 2 years ago, my God, February 2018, about Courier's the MX1 and new bits. And Bruce writes, "Hello, John. My search for floppy disk data to disk image procedure continues. The probable answer is in talking to old webmasters of many web pages holding data on FTP sites, downloadable sound pads for the original Korg M1. I imagine all the files must be compatible with the SysX system exclusive format. In brackets, yes, question mark. I understand the Korg M1 PCM files are the same as Korg T1 PCM files. Is that correct? Cheers, Bruce." Now, I know that Bruce knows the answer to this because I've chatted to him several times between him actually putting this question on the channel and me answering it on the channel. But I think it's worthwhile actually answering the question as one of these mailbag sessions. Now, as many of you will know, I have solved the copy procedure. I know how to do it. I have got the setup now to do it. So that bit is sort of, I'm not going to answer that. And I'm also not going to give away the trade secrets because it took me a long time to work that out. However, the other 2 points I want to pick up on to you, the wider audience. So, the first point is the M1 and the T1 are compatible to a point, in that a SysX file created on an M1 can be loaded on a T1 or any of the T series, to be honest. However, and then the reason for that is quite simply that the T series, in terms of an architectural precision, how the keyboard was constructed, is an upgrade to the M1. So that's not a problem. However, if you go the other way around and create a sample, a patch on the T1, and then try to save it back to the M1, the likelihood is that might not work. And the reason for that is that the T series has far more memory available to it. I'm not going to go into the whys and wherefores at this point, but just it has more memory spaces available to it, and therefore, because it has more memory spaces available to it and has a wider memory set, it is possible that some of the patches you create just will not load on your M1 because it can't physically load them. There is also the case that in the T1 you have the more expanded memory, and anything created using that expanded memory, it's got no hope of loading on the T1. The second point I want to raise, and this is really interesting, is old websites are disappearing. Now, a few years back, there were several websites containing SysX files for many legacy machines. I can remember when I sort of started rebuilding the studio, I used to go onto various websites, and you could download the SysX files with all the sounds on it. But definitely in the last 7 years or so since I rebuilt the studio or started collecting again and buying synthesizers, etc., I have noticed that many of these sites are starting to disappear. So links that I had previously saved on my Windows machine or on my Mac now no longer function. The websites are no longer there. Now, I suspect that could be for a number of reasons. One of those being that the sites of people who ran the sites have moved on. Potentially they've died, and nobody really knows how those sites are. The domain names have lapsed, site gone. And obviously, if nobody's paying the service provider takes the website down anyway. So we are where we are. And there was no one there to take them over. So they are slowly starting to disappear. We are all getting older. So hopefully that sort of put things out there. If you have these things, I mean, the reason why I started the disk library was to sort of kind of cope with some of this stuff, which is, making sure that this stuff is preserved. Otherwise, it will disappear. It will disappear. And you hope that people, when they're going through relatives' chattels, will realise the worth of some of this stuff and will pass it on to people who can preserve it for a period of time. The next one comes from Nymasan. And in response to the Behringer R8 updated in firmware video I did about a month ago, and he writes, I love the Behringer and their products, but I hate their firmware updates. It's such a pain in the arse. And I have to be honest and say that the Behringer update mechanism is far better than others that I could mention. At least it automates the whole sort of computer side of it. As opposed to some of the other update processes that, you have to log on in a certain mode, then you have to open something up, then you have to unzip something, then you have to copy something from somewhere to somewhere, then you have to eject it, then you have to, you get the drift. So I'm not sure what problems you're having with the Behringer update. My specific problem with the Behringer update was the fact that the release notes missed, well, actually there were no release notes with the last release, but they missed a vital step, which was to actually do something to the RD8 to make it accept the file. That was my biggest gripe with the update process, but other than that, once I worked that piece out, the update was relatively smooth. And the final one from this section, from DJ Dark D. And in response to the TB3 initial setup options video I did April last year. And he goes, okay, so how do I actually get the sounds it produces to go inside a door like FL Studio to then be able to record what I've been creating? I know I need a sound card, but which cables do I need and how exactly set it up in FL Studio? Can't seem to find this exact instruction anywhere. So, the TB3, like all the area equipment, will present audio via USB. So, to be honest, this is probably not a door issue. This is probably more to do with the way you set the equipment up. Personally, I've never used FL Studio, so I can't really comment about how this FL Studio product by ImageLine works, but most doors use the same style of interface. So once you've got the TB3 drivers installed on your Mac or your PC, and plug the USB cable in, the TB3 should present two channels of audio, a left and a right, to the computer. And then you should be able to, within the door, and I know within the Mac you have to aggregate the procedures, aggregate the inputs, but you should be able to route those signals coming from the USB audio into the door. Alternatively, you can go down the route that you've suggested, which is go and get a sound card. Well, in reality, it's not a sound card, it's a sound interface like a Focusrite or one of the other interfaces. There are many on the market. M-Audio, of course, when I do this, I can't think of any straight off the top of my head, but there are many audio interfaces on the market you can go and choose. All of them operate in pretty much the same way. You plug the audio channel into one of the inputs on the audio interface, and it shows up on that interface, on that input in the computer, and then you can route that into your door. I can't really say much more than that because it's a very generic question, but they are the two mechanisms for getting audio off the TB3 into your door.